Hello, I'm Joseph, and I have a question for you. Have you ever wondered why you can get a group of people together, all of whom individually are smart, talented, competent, etc., but when you put them together in a team, they act like a bunch of idiots, making bad decisions, being less than the sum of their skills? Why can you get a group of highly paid professional football players together, many of whom play in Champions League teams, but when they get together to play in the national team, they rarely get past the qualifying round of the World Cup? As you may know, I'm Swiss, and I notice this quite often with our national football team. Do you recognize this phenomenon? Did you ever ask yourself why something like this happens? As one of my friends once asked me, did you ever wonder why you can get a group of young lads together and get the Beatles, but put another group of young lads together and you get Nickelback? Why does this happen? It's not only a matter of talent or intelligence. As we'll see, the correlation between individual intelligence and team performance is questionable at best. But if IQ is not the deciding factor for team intelligence and performance, what is it? If you're listening to this talk, you already know the answer. It's psychological safety. But is that all it takes? You might be surprised to know that the concept of psychological safety has been around for over 50 years. It was first written about in 1965 by Shine and Bennis, and was picked up once again by Kahn in 1990. But it first gained in visibility and popularity with Amy Edmondson's work in the late 1990s, and finally became the buzzword we all know, following Google's discovery of its importance in their Project Aristotle. But why is it a buzzword? Not only is psychological safety important for team performance, the term itself sounds cool. We all know what safety is, and hey, psychology deals with humans, and we're all humans, that means we're all psychologists, right? I am not here to tell you what psychological safety is. You can find a multitude of articles on it with just a simple web search. I will allow myself to point out, however, that psychological safety is not holding hands and singing Kumbaya after your meeting, as many non-psychologists believe. Before we go on, I'd like to talk a little bit about psychological safety from a psychological and complexity perspective and explore its often unclear relationship to trust. The best description for a psychologically safe space comes from my colleague, psychologist Arabella Berger, who says, "A psychologically safe space is like a dance floor where you can be yourself." Psychological safety is an aspect of culture, which itself is a derivative property that emerges as a result of the process of social self-organization. As such, it cannot be directly influenced, and the difficulty of changing it in a complex, resilient environment such as an organization is challenging and difficult. Well, this is the reason why many leadership workshops on culture or team events aimed at working together better are not directly transferable to the everyday working environment and do not result in a lasting change to the organization. Even though there are companies saying that they can come in and convert your organization to psychological safety, and although the big consultancies are already launching their psychological safety practice, it just doesn't work that way. Psychological safety is not based on affection. It's based on trust. Simpson says that trust is the intersection of a person's hopes and fears, that traffic crossing where many painful accidents occur. Trust is the currency of our human interactions. We don't trade in information or emotions. No, the amount of information we give, the amount of emotions we show, is dependent on the trust we have for each other. Trust is like the interest on your bank account. It takes a long time to accrue, but it can be spent or lost very quickly. Once lost, though, trust is very difficult, or even impossible, to regain. Trust can only be given. It can't be taken or demanded. Trust is a personal attribute, which means it has both contextual and dispositional moderators. This means that who we trust to do or not do something is dependent on the situation and on our personality type. People who are more extroverted and open to risk-taking tend to be more trusting than people who are shy and introverted. Psychological safety, on the other hand, is an environmental attribute. What do I mean here? The establishment of trust is a process of uncertainty reduction. The problem with trust is that we humans aren't meant to live alone. We become attracted to others, we enter into relationships with others, but these relationships lead to a dependency. and the dependency leads to a vulnerability and anxiety. And this ambivalence between attraction and anxiety leads people to evaluate the partner's behavior in order to reduce the uncertainty. The typical way that this happens is with trust diagnostic situations such as strain tests. Could you do me a favor? We all recognize that. Positive outcomes of such tests and trust diagnostic situations lead to a feeling of increased trust in the partner and to an increased feeling of security, at least in the short term. These feelings of trust, self-differentiation, and increased self-esteem facilitate perceptions of safety. These set the stage for future trust-relevant interactions. Repeated positive experiences over time lead people to feel comfortable being around others, knowing that they can trust them, and this leads to the feeling of being in an environment of trust, a space of psychological safety. So, we've talked about psychological safety and trust and how they relate to each other. But what's still missing? Is this all you really need to have a high-performing team and organization? Research conducted at MIT and Carnegie Mellon showed that there was a correlation between team intelligence and team performance, but the intelligence of the teams was not highly correlated to the intelligence of the individuals. What it was correlated to were these three factors: empathy, psychological safety, and gender diversity. The correlation with gender diversity was at first surprising, as the researchers were not looking for it, and originally they considered it to be a moderating variable, since women are normally considered to be more empathic than men. Statistical analysis, though, showed that gender diversity alone was a powerful factor in a team's intelligence and its performance. How can we assess the performance of a team or an organization? There are two ways. The easiest way is to ask people, while remembering that people normally have a self-report bias, where they give the answer that's expected of them or the answer that puts them in a good light. Alternatively, we can observe them while they're at work. This way is more laborious, but it provides us with more and different information than answers to questions do. The best way is to combine the two techniques into a multimodal, mixed method approach. This is what we have been experimenting with. The question we posed ourselves is, since we know how the researchers at MIT and CMU tested team intelligence and performance, can we possibly use these techniques not only to assess, but also to improve the way teams perform? Based on our research, the answer to this question is definitely yes. We can use exercises based on the original research to improve team performance. In order to do this, though, we first need to understand the answer to another question. That question is, what does a team actually do? If we look at some typical answers to this question, which we collected from a previous presentation on this topic, we see the standard answers that we expect to see. A team delivers what they're committed to doing, they deliver value to the customer, they do what they're told to do, etc. The problem with these answers is that they're not precise enough, they're difficult to quantify, and they're not easily actionable. In order to identify precise, quantifiable, and actionable indicators of team performance, we need to go deeper into the psychological research on team actions and interactions. The groundbreaking research on this topic was done by Joseph McGrath, who identified 4 basic activities that teams do. They generate new ideas, they choose between alternatives, they negotiate, and they execute on tasks. In the observational part of our studies, we had teams perform exercises that were finely tuned to assess these different activities as separately as possible. What these exercises were and how we use them to assess and improve team performance is a central topic of the workshop that we're doing after the break. It's important to note that all 3 factors must be present for a team to achieve high performance. The lack of any 1 or 2 factors can lead to potentially negative consequences. With only psychological safety and empathy comes a groupthink mentality. In a safe and trusted in-group, negative traits start to flourish, potentially leading to corruption, for example in the Enron scandal, or to police brutality. With only diversity and empathy, people have understanding but lack the courage to express themselves, and both creativity and innovation are stifled. And with only psychological safety and diversity, but no empathy and feelings for others, the situation becomes similar to the film Trading Places with Dan Aykroyd and Eddie Murphy, where two callous millionaire brothers conspire to switch the lives and fortunes of two young men to observe what happens to them, not caring at all about the fate of the young men. We propose that gender diversity, similar to ethnic, cultural, religious, and other types of diversity, is one specific enabler of what Reynolds and Lewis term cognitive diversity. Differences in the way people think, differences in the way people respond to, engage with, and interpret change. We believe that cognitive diversity will lead to a higher capability for innovation, for creating quality solutions, and for developing more interesting options before making choices. Just as psychological safety will make people more comfortable in celebrating their diversity by expressing different points of view, we believe that the addition of empathy to Reynolds and Lewis's model will aid in the acceptance and support for these diverse and novel ideas. As futurist Jim Dator once said, any useful idea about the future should first appear to be ridiculous, with the caveat, not every ridiculous idea is useful. A lack of psychological safety will damage any ideas coming from a cognitively diverse group. How often have you heard the statement, "Don't waste our time, that's crazy"? Fear of sanction is not about disciplinary procedures, but rather about social sanctions and the loss of esteem and respect, embarrassment in front of others, things which we are all attuned to and designed to avoid, if at all possible. How much social backlash would you suffer in your organization if you contributed a ridiculous idea? Remember, psychological safety is like that dance floor. Can you really be yourself? For the questionnaire part of our research, we expand on Reynolds and Lewis's two-dimensional model, which gives an overview of the feelings of psychological safety and cognitive diversity in a team or an organization. What we see here is the input at two different points of time of an organization that one of us has worked with. The spread between individual data points is always there, and that's okay. It reflects our perception, our experience of the climate, of the culture. It is our experience, and we describe it the way we feel it, the way we feel about innovation, adaptability, agility, etc. The question, once again, is whether you can differentiate between these areas in a quantitative manner using something observable, something you can manage and work with, such as behavior. The difference is between what are termed generative and non-generative behaviors, which are the dominant behaviors that are exhibited by teams and organizations with different levels of cognitive diversity and psychological safety. Any organization that has been around for a while has its organizational culture, and the culture is part of the reason that it's been around for a while. Just coming in and saying that the organization needs to change their culture and become psychologically safe is a risky thing to do. Actually, any organization that has been around for a while has two cultures. It has the official culture and it has the real culture. The official culture is what is probably seen on the website and on the press releases and what appears in the company's mission statement. The real culture is what is seen inside the organization, often reflected in the so-called creation myths. What are the dominant behaviors in the people you interact with? It's not the culture, it's the people. Remember, culture is an emergent property. You can't just send management off to an off-site workshop and expect that anything will change. Our argument is that it's not necessary to eliminate all non-generative behaviors. Firstly, you can never do that, nor should you want to do it. Sometimes those behaviors are the right ones for the context. The question is, are they the dominant ones? It's the balance that makes a massive difference. Our goal is to create an environment where generative behaviors are more present and dominant. In addition to dominant behaviors, we look at the prevalent emotions and the prevalent states, the descriptors of the environment, characteristics, or traits. This information helps us monitor our interventions and see whether a change is taking place as a result of them and what kind of change it is. I would like to finish with a few last thoughts. Psychological safety is a necessary but not sufficient prerequisite for high-performing teams and organizations. You can't buy psychological safety. You should focus on diversity and inclusion first. Empathy will evolve, as will psychological safety. So, that's it. If you'd like to learn more about the tests and exercises we did to assess and improve the performance of the teams that we studied, please attend our workshop after the break. If you'd like to learn more about the work we do and how it can help you and your teams and organizations, please reach out to us on LinkedIn or elsewhere. Thank you.